On a night unlike any other, enveloped in mystery and awe, Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, embarked on a journey that transcended time, space, and human comprehension. This was not simply a journey across lands, but a divine ascent that reverberated through the heavens, leaving an everlasting impact on the hearts of the faithful. This event, known as Isra and Miraj, remains one of the most remarkable and spiritually profound moments in Islamic history. It occurred during a time of personal grief and rejection from society, offering the Prophet not only divine comfort but a sacred mission that would forever shape the lives of Muslims. In the silence of the night, the Prophet was transported from the sacred mosque in Mecca to the farthest mosque in Jerusalem, and from there he ascended through the 7 heavens. Along the way, he met the noble prophets who had come before him and ultimately stood in the presence of the Almighty. What he witnessed, visions of paradise and hell, encounters with angels, and the sounds and sights of celestial realms, defy imagination, yet are deeply embedded in the fabric of faith. During this divine ascent, the 5 daily prayers were established as a direct command from Allah to his messenger, and through him to all of humanity. To hear this story is to be humbled. To reflect upon it is to stir something profound within the soul. For this journey serves not only as a testament to God's power, but as a window into the unseen realities of the afterlife, the purpose of creation, and the infinite mercy offered to the believers. It is more than just history. It is a powerful reminder of the unseen world that surrounds us. The night began quietly like any other, with Mecca immersed in darkness. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, rested near the sacred Kaaba or at the home of his cousin Hani, unaware that an unimaginable event was about to unfold. Without warning, the veil separating the earthly from the divine was lifted. The angel Gabriel, majestic and awe-inspiring, appeared before the Prophet. What happened next was no ordinary visitation. Gabriel performed a miraculous act, opening the Prophet's chest, cleansing his heart with the pure water from the well of Zamzam, and filling it with light, faith, and divine wisdom. This was not merely a physical purification, but a spiritual preparation, one that would ready the Prophet's soul for a journey that defied nature and time. Outside, awaiting him, stood a celestial being like no other, Burak. Radiant and swift, neither horse nor donkey, Burak was a heavenly steed capable of covering immense distances in an instant. As the Prophet mounted Burak, guided by Gabriel, the journey known as Isra began. In moments they had crossed the vast Arabian desert and arrived at Masjid al-Aqsa in Jerusalem, a city sacred to prophets and scriptures before him. This was no ordinary journey. It was an unfolding of dimensions, where space contracted and time collapsed at the command of the divine. With each step, the Prophet was not only guided by an angel, but by destiny itself. As he approached the revered grounds of Al-Aqsa, he entered the realm of ancient revelations, where the prayers of past prophets still lingered in the air. This was only the beginning, a doorway into realms unknown, an invitation into the company of the greatest messengers of God, and a prelude to a journey that would take him not only to the stars, but beyond them, into the very presence of the Almighty. Upon arriving in Jerusalem, the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, was greeted not by crowds of people, but by a congregation unlike any the world had ever seen. Within the sacred walls of Masjid al-Aqsa, a divine assembly had gathered, composed not of earthly rulers or scholars, but of prophets, messengers of Allah who had walked the earth in different times and places. There stood Abraham, the father of monotheism, Moses, the liberator of his people, Jesus, the bearer of divine compassion, and many others who had delivered God's message to humanity. Each one had fulfilled a sacred mission, faced trials, and spoken to generations in their own language and context. In this extraordinary moment, it was the Prophet Muhammad who was chosen to lead them all in prayer. As he stood before them and began the prayer, It was more than just a moment of worship, it was a symbolic act that confirmed his position as the final messenger, the seal of the prophets. It was as though all the revelations that had come before now converged into one truth, united under his leadership. The prayer that echoed within the walls of Al-Aqsa that night was not just a ritual, it was a statement to the heavens and the earth that the message of Allah had reached its final form. This sacred gathering wasn't for celebration or ceremony, it was a passing of the torch, a heavenly acknowledgement of the continuity of divine guidance from Adam to Muhammad. For the Prophet, it was both an honor and a weighty confirmation of the responsibility he carried. The ancient mosque's walls stood as silent witnesses to the unity of divine revelation, the brotherhood of all the prophets, and the dawning of a new era in humanity's spiritual journey, one that would soon soar beyond the heavens. Having completed the prayer at Al-Aqsa, with the sacred gathering still echoing in the air, Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, was ready for the next phase of his miraculous journey. It was now time for the earth to give way to the skies and for the very fabric of the universe to be pulled back, allowing a mortal to behold the unimaginable. Accompanied by the angel Gabriel, the prophet began his celestial ascent, the Mirage, an extraordinary journey through the 7 heavens. Each heaven was more wondrous than the last, each encounter more profound, and each moment carried a weight that stretched the limits of human comprehension. Upon reaching the first heaven, Gabriel sought permission to enter. A voice from beyond asked, "Who is it?" Gabriel replied, introducing himself and the prophet. Once the gatekeeper was informed that the prophet had been sent for, the doors opened. Inside the first heaven, the prophet met Adam, the father of humanity, who welcomed him warmly as a righteous son and noble prophet. Around Adam were the souls of his descendants. Those who had lived righteously were smiling, while the wicked were weeping. It was a poignant reminder of the responsibility that free will brings and the consequences of one's actions in the hereafter. Their journey continued as they reached the second heaven, where permission was again granted. Here, the prophet encountered 2 revered figures, Jesus, son of Mary, and his cousin John the Baptist, Yahya. They greeted him with warmth and affection, and their words carried divine compassion and wisdom. The harmony between their messages and the embrace they offered Muhammad spoke of unity among all the prophets. In the third heaven, the prophet met Yusuf, Joseph, whose beauty was said to surpass that of all others. His radiant face reflected not just physical beauty, but the purity and faith that defined him. Yusuf welcomed the prophet with grace, embodying the perfection of divine creation. Upon reaching the fourth heaven, the prophet met Idris, a prophet renowned for his wisdom and unwavering devotion to worship. Idris had been elevated to a high station, and his greeting to Muhammad was filled with reverence, symbolizing the divine elevation that comes with perseverance in righteousness. In the fifth heaven, the prophet encountered Harun, the brother of Moses. Harun greeted him like a brother, with love and gentleness. His presence reminded the prophet of the importance of leadership and community, as Harun had once stood beside Moses in guiding the children of Israel. As they ascended to the sixth heaven, the prophet met Musa, Moses, one of the mightiest messengers of Allah. Musa's reaction was emotional, as he wept upon hearing that Muhammad's nation would surpass his in size and blessings in the hereafter. His tears were not born of jealousy, but out of genuine love for his own people, and this meeting later proved crucial, as Musa would offer guidance to Muhammad during his meeting with Allah. Finally, in the seventh heaven, the prophet met Abraham, who was leaning against the celestial Kaaba, Bait al-Ma'mur, a heavenly house visited by 70,000 angels every day, never to return. Ibrahim welcomed the prophet with joy, as a father welcomes his beloved son, and offered guidance on prayer and unity, urging the prophet to extend peace and blessings to his nation. Each heaven provided more than just a meeting. It was a reaffirmation of the divine message across generations. The Prophet's journey through the seven heavens was not merely a physical ascent, but a spiritual unveiling, traversing the corridors of divine legacy. Each prophet he encountered served as a witness to the eternal truth, the oneness of Allah, and the sacred duty of guiding humanity. In these encounters, Muhammad stood not only as a man, but as the final bearer of a timeless message, bridging the heavens and the earth. Beyond the seventh heaven, where creation fades and even light becomes sacred, stood a majestic symbol known only to those who had received the highest divine favor. Sidrat al-Muntaha, the lot tree of the utmost boundary. This marked the point where the realms of the created and the Creator met, a boundary beyond which no being, not even the Archangel Gabriel, could pass. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, stood before this radiant tree, whose branches stretched beyond the limits of space and whose leaves shone like emeralds. Its fruit gleamed like vessels of gold, a vision of unimaginable beauty and splendor. This sacred boundary marked the final stop for Gabriel, who turned to the Prophet with reverence and said, "If I go beyond this point, I will be consumed." The angel who had guided countless prophets now stood still, witnessing a moment that no other being could experience. Alone, the Prophet continued forward, bathed in divine light, guided by the invitation of his Lord. Beyond the lot tree lay a realm of intimacy and divine closeness, a space reserved for a single soul chosen by Allah. It was here that the highest mysteries of existence unfolded, where time stood still and the eternal truths of the universe were whispered into his heart. In this supreme moment, the Prophet Muhammad experienced a nearness to Allah that no other being had ever attained, a moment beyond time, immersed in divine light and majesty. As the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, ventured deeper into the realms of the unseen, he was granted glimpses of the ultimate destinations awaiting every soul, visions of paradise and hell, two eternal realities that contrasted sharply, one filled with mercy and the other resonating with justice. In paradise, he saw unimaginable beauty. Lush gardens stretched endlessly, filled with trees whose trunks were made of gold and whose shade offered peace beyond description. Rivers flowed not with water alone, but with milk, honey, and pure wine, untainted by intoxication. He witnessed palaces made of pearl and sapphire and the laughter of those who dwelled in bliss, a reward for their faith, patience, and righteousness. The scents of Jannah filled the air, fragrances that soothed the soul and lifted the heart. It was a place where no eye had seen, no ear had heard, and no mind had ever conceived such splendor. Everything there whispered of Allah's mercy and infinite generosity. Yet the Prophet was also shown hell, a place of darkness, agony, and consequence. He saw people punished in terrifying ways, each torment reflecting the sins they committed in life. Flames roared with ceaseless hunger, chains rattled, and cries echoed from depths that chilled the heart. It was a realm of regret, where the soul could feel the weight of its choices without reprieve. He saw those who betrayed trust, who lied, who oppressed others, all meeting their recompense. These visions were not meant to terrify for the sake of fear, but to awaken the heart, to serve as a warning and a guidepost. In witnessing both realms, the Prophet carried back not just a message, but a mirror to humanity's fate. In the most sacred and exalted part of his journey, the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, was brought into the divine presence, an honor no other created being had ever received. There are no human words capable of fully describing what took place in that sacred meeting. It was a moment beyond time, space, and comprehension. The details remain veiled in mystery, preserved in the folds of divine mercy. Yet its outcome would shape the spiritual rhythm of every Muslim's daily life until the end of time. It was here, in this intimate nearness to Allah, that the 5 daily prayers were revealed, an eternal gift for the Prophet's nation. Initially, Allah ordained 50 prayers each day. The Prophet accepted this with reverence, but as he descended, he was stopped by Moses. peace be upon him, who asked what had been prescribed. Upon hearing of the 50, Moses advised him to return and ask for a reduction, knowing from experience the limits of human endurance, out of concern. After the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, returned to Allah, the number of daily prayers was gradually reduced, from 50 to 40, then 30, 20, and finally to 5. Yet, in Allah's infinite mercy, the reward for these 5 prayers remained as if 50 had been performed. This exchange between the Prophet and his Lord, with the intercession of Moses along the way, not only revealed the spiritual significance of prayer, but also the compassion woven into divine commands. These 5 daily prayers were never meant to be burdensome, but rather lifelines, anchors that would continually draw the hearts of believers back to their Creator throughout the day. Each prayer became an opportunity for remembrance, reflection, renewal, and a moment of closeness with the divine. To this very day, each prostration offered by a believer echoes the Prophet's celestial journey, a small taste of that miraculous ascent. Prayer is more than a ritual. It is a conversation with Allah, a moment of surrender and elevation. It connects the temporal to the eternal, the earthly to the divine, and reminds the soul that it was not created to wander aimlessly, but to rise again and again toward the light of its Creator. At the pinnacle of the celestial journey, the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, stood alone in the divine presence. No angel, no prophet, not even Gabriel, could accompany him beyond the boundary of creation. What transpired in that pure light and holiness remains largely concealed, wrapped in reverence and mystery. But what we do know is that it was during this intimate encounter that a gift unlike any other was bestowed upon his nation, the obligation of daily prayer. Initially, Allah had prescribed 50 prayers each day. The Prophet accepted this command with full submission and began his descent. As he descended, he encountered the Prophet Moses, peace be upon him, who inquired about the command from Allah. Upon hearing the number of prayers, Musa advised the Prophet to return and ask for a reduction, explaining that, having led a nation himself, he knew such a burden would be too much for the people. Moved by compassion for his followers, the Prophet returned to Allah and humbly requested a reduction. This exchange continued multiple times, each time lowering the number of prayers until it was reduced to 5. Though the number was lowered, Allah, in His infinite mercy, declared that the reward for these 5 prayers would be as though 50 had been performed. This extraordinary kindness revealed not only Allah's deep love for His creation, but also the Prophet's deep concern for His people. The daily prayers became more than a command, they became a sacred bridge, a means of connecting believers to their Lord multiple times a day. Through these prayers, the soul would rise again and again toward its origin, renewing faith, purifying the heart, and strengthening the bond with the divine. What was gifted in the heavens would resonate on earth for generations, 5 moments each day to remember who we are, where we came from, and to whom we will ultimately return. When the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, returned to Jerusalem and then swiftly back to Mecca before dawn, the miracles of that single night had stretched beyond the limits of time, encompassing divine encounters and revelations that would shape the spiritual foundation of Islam. However, upon his return, the Prophet did not face celebration, but intense resistance. And the story of the night journey and ascension, with its accounts of traveling vast distances and ascending through the heavens, was so extraordinary that many found it impossible to believe. When he shared the details with the Quraysh, their reaction was swift and mocking. They laughed, scoffed, and used the story to further discredit him, portraying him as a man lost in fantasy. They challenged him with sharp questions. What did Al-Aqsa look like? Were there caravans along the way? Could he describe them in detail? They were certain they could catch him in a mistake. But with clarity and calm, the Prophet answered each question with remarkable accuracy. He described the architecture of Masjid al-Aqsa, its doors, its surroundings, details only someone who had truly been there could know. He even described a caravan he had seen during the journey, detailing the number of camels, their markings, and the timing of their arrival in Mecca. When the caravan arrived just as he had described, some hearts were moved, yet many chose denial over belief. This moment was not just a test for the Prophet, it was also a trial of faith for the believers. While doubt crept into some hearts, others grew stronger. Their trust in the truth Muhammad carried unwavering. Amidst the confusion and mockery that followed, one man's unwavering faith stood like a rock, calm, firm, and immovable. When news of the Prophet's claim reached Abu Bakr, the Quraysh hastened to him, sure that even he would not accept such an unbelievable story. They approached him with smirks, saying, "Do you hear what your friend says? That he went to Jerusalem and then to the heavens, all in one night?" They expected disbelief, or at least hesitation, but Abu Bakr did not falter. His response was simple, powerful, and unforgettable. If he said it, then it is certainly true. With these words, he earned the eternal title As-Siddiq, the Truthful One. His immediate, unquestioning belief was not based on blind loyalty, but on a deep trust in the Prophet's character, integrity, and divine connection. Abu Bakr knew Muhammad was not a man of falsehood. If he claimed something so extraordinary, then it must have happened. Abu Bakr's unwavering faith lifted the spirits of those shaken by doubt and silenced the skepticism of those who wavered. His certainty became a beacon of strength for others, a reminder that true faith shines brightest in times of trial. His loyalty not only reaffirmed his own faith, but solidified the foundation of the early Muslim community. In a moment of ridicule and rejection, his voice rang clear and true, standing as a reminder that real faith is strongest when tested. The miraculous journey of Isra and Miraj did not fade into obscurity over time. Instead, it became a living memory, woven into the spiritual fabric of the Muslim world. Each year, believers commemorate that sacred night, not just as a historical event, but as a moment of divine closeness, awe, and mercy that continues to echo in the hearts of the faithful. Across cities and villages, mosques are illuminated, their minarets glowing softly in honor of the night the Prophet ascended through the heavens. The air fills with the sound of Quran recitation, supplications, and reflections on the meanings of that sacred journey. Under the Ottoman Empire, the night took on cultural beauty, with lamps lit in mosques, creating a radiant display known as the Night of Miraj. Palms, symbolizing spiritual light and guidance, were placed. Gatherings were held where the Prophet's journey was retold with reverence, and communities came together in devotion and unity. Special prayers were offered, poems recited, and traditional hospitality extended with tea and milk, reminders of generosity, remembrance, and togetherness. Beyond these external customs, the true legacy of Miraj lies in its message. It calls the believer to ascend, not through the skies, but through sincerity, prayer, and closeness to Allah. It invites hearts to rise above the distractions of the world and seek the light that guided the Prophet through the heavens. It is a night of reflection, a call to deepen one's faith, and a reminder that divine mercy always waits for those who journey toward it. The story of Isra and Miraj, though embraced by Muslims universally for its spiritual depth and miraculous nature, has also inspired thoughtful reflection and diverse interpretations throughout Islamic history. While the central truth remains clear, that the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, was taken from Mecca to Jerusalem and ascended through the heavens, scholars have differed on how exactly this event unfolded. Some have viewed it as a physical journey, one in which the Prophet's body and soul were taken through the realms of the unseen. This interpretation emphasizes the limitless power of Allah, who can defy natural laws and carry his servant through dimensions beyond human understanding. Others have suggested the journey occurred as a vision or dream, believing that such an experience, granted by Allah, could be just as real and meaningful. These scholars see the journey as symbolic, a spiritual ascent conveying divine truths through powerful imagery and revelation. Yet many uphold the belief that the Prophet was fully awake, experiencing the journey both physically and spiritually, with all its beauty, awe, and wonder. Rather than divide, these interpretations reflect the richness of Islamic thought and the deep reverence Muslims hold for this event. They show that the essence of Mi'raj transcends the specifics of how it occurred. What matters most is the light it brought to the world, the prayer it established, the faith it affirmed, and the invitation it extended to every heart seeking nearness to the divine. The journey of Isra and Mi'raj is not just a miraculous event of the past, it is a timeless message whispered across the ages. It reminds us that no matter how heavy life becomes, the heavens are always within reach for those who seek Allah with sincerity. In a single night, the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, was shown the beauty of paradise, the warnings of hell, the company of the prophets, and the embrace of the divine. Through him, we were gifted the daily prayers, a sacred connection that binds our hearts to the heavens 5 times a day. This journey teaches us that faith can elevate the soul beyond the limits of the world, that struggles are followed by divine gifts, and that closeness to Allah is always within reach. Let this story awaken your spirit, strengthen your resolve, and guide you on your own path toward light, purpose, and eternal peace.